Hello, my peeps, and welcome back to Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves. I am your host, Ike, and before I get too carried away with all this catching up we gotta do, I'd like to just take a moment and say thanks for being here and giving this pod a listen. It means a lot to me that you chose to use your precious time and give me and my guest your ears. Now, after you still have the wherewithal. It'd be really cool if you shared this with someone who you think would like it, or just subscribe yourself if you already haven't. That'd be dope. And if you want to tell me what parts of the show you were passionate about, peeved you off, or just say hi, you can always reach me via Twitter at @likeikes and on the emails at passionatepeevespodcast@gmail.com. I really need to find another word other than at to say there, so I don't say at like I'm a Star Wars vehicle of transportation and death. Anywho, as I'm sure you noticed if you are a listener, we're back in the saddle, baby! Couple weeks off there, but you know, this episode's coming up. Just recorded an episode literally today as well, so we're kind of back in the shuffle of things or something. Anyway, thing that I am not back in the habit of doing is finally lost a team tournament. No! Since I moved to Los Angeles in 2021, and I believe the first team tournament was later that year, I have not cashed a team tournament since then until, you know, the end of March 2024. So over 2 years of just team tournament success. Has not been the same team the whole entire time. It is predominantly two of my best friends and past guests, Dan Silver and Kyler Martin at this point in time. Occasionally that has to be mixed up because, you know, somebody's gone and done something like, I don't know, on a trip or in the process of getting married to the love of their life. Something like that. Anyway, but it was with my boys that I sadly broke the streak. C'est la vie. All good things must come to an end, such as this podcast here in, 20-ish episodes. But it was sad because, it was an awesome stat to have. But, it transpired. It's what it was. No regrets. Had lots of fun hanging out with the boys. Went out, had a lovely dinner later, and played lots of Magic into the evening. So the day was utilized to its fullest, and that was awesome. Thank you so much, boys. I will always love having you as my teammates. So this last week, or the week before this last one, we were finishing up testing at the school that I work at, and I was a test administrator, which was fun. It was nice, mostly chill and quiet. It was, however, very funny, as ours is a charter school. We have very many different methods of doing things, as an incentive to get the kids into the school, we give them money for completing tests, most of which are somewhat mandatory, which is, is very nice of us, and we just want to make it easier on everybody. And the kids' impressions of the situation is just something so funny that I'm sure if I was their age, I would get. But as an adult, it's just bananas. One of which was a story I was told of a middle schooler had to do both these tests. One was physical fitness, just seeing what they could do. And the other one was like a reading writing test or something like that. It took 2 to 3 hours, and they were paid $40. And the kid, after receiving his money, reportedly said, I was not there for this, otherwise it would have been all the better. But according to my fellow test administrator who was there, he said, gave him the money. He goes, this is it? He goes, yeah. This was the amount that we said we were going to do. He goes, what a ripoff! And then, stomped his way out. So this is the clientele that I get to work with. So much fun! At least, storytelling form anyway. I had a kid complain about not being able to have his phone out during the test and kind of give me shit. And complain that it's because I was white that I was telling him, even though I told the whole entire room that they couldn't have their their cell phones out. And then upon me telling him, hey, just put it in your backpack, put it in your pocket, it's fine. I don't need to take it. You just can't have it out. And he goes, no, it's fine. I'll stick it up my ass. And then he proceeded to lift a cheek, turn the cell phone sideways, and put it firmly in between his buttocks. Awesome. Just awesome. Because apparently his pockets were too inconvenient and his backpack was too far away, even though it was seated in the chair next to him. So I don't know what that was about, but kids these days, I tell you. Luckily, I get to get away from the kids this week as I am now on spring break. Woo! So I get all of this week off. Then I'll be back for, what is it, 2 weeks? Start back up on the 8th and then through the 19th. After the 19th, I'm going to take a week-long break to play the upcoming Pro Tour in Seattle, which is going to be awesome. I get to see my brother. I get to play on the Pro Tour again. Hopefully stay on this time. That's the goal and the dream, is to requalify so that I can go to Amsterdam during the summer. But either which way, with a lot of friends, Chris Ferber, Derek Davis, and co. Love testing with these guys, love hanging with these guys, so this is a fantastic time ahead. Speaking of fantastic times ahead, and to leave you jealous, tomorrow I'm going to Disneyland, batches! I am joining my mother and father there for 2 days of lovely Disney fun. This is going to be great. Very excited. So, say stay tuned for results, but it's going to be, it was the best place on earth. So, there we are. Anywho's a what's-its. This week, I believe we have the incomparable Bex on the podcast. Bex is coming to us via... who was it? It was either Cassidy Cook or Kyle Rowan. I don't remember which. Sorry for not giving, respect where respect is potentially due. Either which way, Bex was awesome to have on, and I hope you enjoy our time spent together and the words we spoke. All right, take it away, past me. All right, folks, today we have a real treat. We have someone who created a cat cafe in the middle of the desert, is blessed with sub-mechanophobia, and kissed someone in a cat costume in front of 5,000 people. It's the one, the only, Rebecca Svensson! How we doing?
That's great. I don't really go by Rebecca anymore, though.
What do you prefer to go by?
Bex.
Bex. So for those that don't know, and up until recently myself, what is it that you do?
I teach. I do a lot of art installations. I work art department on sets. And then I also do animation and make comics.
When did so you teach, do you teach art as well as practice it in seemingly all aspects of your life, or do you teach something else?
I do teach art, but I also teach I also tutor in other subjects like math and science.
Me too. So
for funsies.
How long have you been making art as an occupation, I guess? How long has this been a form of monetary ingress for you?
Probably since I started using this app called Thumbtack, which is how you get leads for animation. So I guess officially I would say 2017. But I've been doing it my whole life since I was a little kid.
How little are we talking here?
I was drawing stuff in the dirt and getting in trouble for bringing art to school when I was as young as 7. You
got in trouble for bringing art to school?
Because I was a really bad student. I would always bring toys, and I would just be, they'd be doing class, and I would be doing watercolor. It's just kind of or I would draw on the back of tests and hand them in, and they would grade the test and the drawing.
Did you ever do better on? Okay, what was your ratio of grade of art to grade of test?
The art always got an A+. Let's be real. This was a German class was a big one where the teacher would just grade the art also.
Aww, that's so awesome.
Which is funny in retrospect.
Were you one of the students that did well in art as well, or did you incidentally kind of not follow direction, not do what they wanted you to do, and not do well in art?
Um, I did not excel in art, I guess because there was other students that were like more into, I guess, the practical applications, like when it came to like painting and stuff. Like they were like my subject matters were always like really contemporary and kind of like cartoony, and so like teachers at least in New Jersey were like, oh well, we want people who are doing realistic stuff and like people, and so they were more interested. Like my art teacher was more supportive of like my sculptural things and like my costuming stuff, which I didn't end up going into like at all, than like the other things that I was doing.
So we're drawing in the dirt. We're drawing instead of doing our work. We're drawing on the back of our work. When did you first think that this was what you wanted to like do?
Probably not until I had to choose college, because I was I was like growing up in New Jersey, I was pretty much like told that mostly what I would do is become like an art teacher, which wasn't the worst thing in the world, but I wanted to do other stuff and I just didn't think it was possible for where I lived. So I was like, yeah, instead of following my dream, maybe I'll be a surgeon. um
Instead of doing art, maybe I'll take 10 years of school, get massively in debt.
Well, I've had my finger cut off and I've had my head cracked open. So at the time, like as an 18-year-old, it's like I'd gone through a few times in my life where surgery had saved me from losing a limb. Um, so to me, like part of that, it just felt like an important job that would be. I was worried about being like secure
Yeah.
financially, which is a weird thing for like an 18-year-old. I even considered the military, and my parents were like, "Yeah, you definitely. I don't think you should do that." Because you're an artist.
You're talking about like breaking stuff, almost dying here. How were you like a very rambunctious, adventurous child, or was this just like accidents and like just interrupted your
um,
world?
I realized that it's like a feature of where I grew up. I grew up in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. So essentially, this is like the largest stretch of pine trees in kind of the world. There's only a few places on Earth that this happens. So I grew up around a lot of dense like forests, like up against, you know, neighborhoods and things like that. So playing outside was literally like what we did. There was no reason not to. So a lot of it was me playing outside with friends and jumping off the roof of our shed in the back onto a trampoline. And like, I remember one time I tried to do that and I slipped, fell, and grabbed a light and it fell on top of me. And that's like a crack on my head. Like that, things like that would happen a lot. It was a very cool place to grow up in retrospect. I did not think it at the time.
So where did you go to college, and what was your like initial major?
So I initially went to college in Philadelphia. And I went to the art institute there, which doesn't exist anymore. And is now a
No.
Uniqlo.
Ew.
Yeah, right?
Boo.
Yeah, I mean, at least the accreditation carried over. I went for 2 years in Philadelphia and then 2 years here in LA. And then I went to Cal Arts for a short bit. And I
Did it
also
live up
took
to the hype, or were you let down?
I was significantly let down, but I think that's because there was a lot of hype.
Valid.
And I talked to other Cal Arts alum, and they're like, "Yeah, it's gone downhill." Do
It's
not
not as
quote me
cool
on
now that
that.
I'm not there.
Yeah, right, right. I think that's what everyone says about every college, right? They're like, "Yeah, it's nothing now."
So after doing all this schooling, what was your first kind of either paid gig or paid opportunity, or maybe this was actually in school, so I don't want to shortcut, how you were making money when you're in college. But what was your first time where you got, because in the intro you talked about how, there's multiple different ways you have kind of, this has been a life force for you. What was the first time that you got paid for your artistic abilities?
I mean, I would sell paintings every now and then. Full disclosure, I mean, I'm the only one in my family that does art, so I mean, they would be my patrons because it's a novelty for
Oh,
them. They're like, I don't know anybody else that does art really. But the first like person who wasn't a family member or friend that like purchased artwork or commissioned something, I was working for Diamond for like a little while, and I don't know if you know who Diamond is.
Do not elaborate.
So they're like a subsidiary of Marvel and some other comic companies, and Diamond is like a distributor. So what I was doing for them, I was coloring comics when I was like, I think my first year of college. Um,
Damn.
and I swear by this, but Craigslist used to be very good for not only finding apartments, but also for finding work. The apartment I'm in right now, I found on Craigslist, just to let everyone know.
Hey,
It's great. Love my
yo.
apartment. But I just found them on there, and I did that for years until that particular subsidiary that I was working for. I was working on Phaser, which is like a comic like superhero from like the 60s or something they were trying to bring back. And I just don't think they really brought
Sadly,
it back.
never came back.
It was extremely old style. It was a great thing to have like in my portfolio because it was professional printed work for like what is a pretty big distributor of comics in general. Um, and it taught me a lot. I learned an awful lot doing that for them. But I was pretty sad because they're the last thing I was going to do. They sent me like this gigantic hard drive, and it was for it was for like an Avengers type comic. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to do this. And then right after that, they just sort of folded. And I was like, okay.
Damn.
And I still have the hard drive. I couldn't give it back. They didn't give me an address. Lost contact. I guess I'll just hold on to this gigantic thing.
So that was your first one. So like myself and many people out there don't know, what was the pay like? Not like dollar amount, but at the time that you got paid, was it enough that you could get by? Was it enough for like, a sandwich? What was how well paid were you?
I don't know that I was very well paid. um, it wasn't anything I stowed away in like savings. I mean, I was a college student at the time, so I didn't have a job in general.
Yeah.
So, and also Philadelphia, very hard place to find work. Unfortunately, it's kind of the reason why I had to move away. Just in general, not even art related.
Hmm.
But I think that it did give me like lunch money. If I were to say, it would probably be like maybe 50 a page, which is pretty low for somebody who's a colorist. But I mean, I take it as sort of an internship.
Yeah.
And they, I put them on resume. I still have them. Like, if you look really far down on my resume, just because it's like a very interesting thing that I did in comics for a while.
What was your next, job heading title after colors? What was the next one that you got an opportunity to do?
I mean, in college, I worked at I worked at like a Korean like juice place for a while. That was interesting.
Doing what?
Just making smoothies. I learned a really good way to make smoothies. You use sherbet, which is funny because East Coast, right? But no, if you're talking about like art related, it probably I worked on this film that was supposed to be about the 80s, and it was called Rock and Roll Stinks, which is on IMDb. It's an IMDb credit that I have. But they wanted the whole film rotoscoped.
Oh, cool. For those that
so
don't know
what yeah, go on.
Well, for those that don't know, what is rotoscoping?
Rotoscoping is basically where you have live action video feed, and you essentially trace over it with animation. And you go frame by frame and you color it in and you fill it in. I'm trying to think. Waltz with Bashir is like a good example of rotoscoping. Waking Life is a good example. There's a few films. Ralph Bakshi used to do it a lot in his films, like rotoscoping. I'm just like name dropping animated things. Hopefully that like clues in. But if they Google it, they'll get it because you can tell when something's rotoscoped, which is why I personally am not the biggest fan of it. But they wanted like there was like a magical portion of the film that needed to be rotoscoped, and they liked it so much they're like, we want you to do the whole film. And I was like, no. You cannot pay me enough to rotoscope an entire film myself. No way. Because it is frame by frame.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you did some amount, it sounds like, of rotoscoping for this film.
Trying to think, it would probably be like a good 10 minutes, which is a lot of work. They paid me really well. They were very nice. I
Despite
just
you
declined
turning
that
down their
part.
offer to rotoscope a whole
Yeah.
movie.
Well, they were much older, so I just don't think they got it. I think they like thought I put it through some sort of magical machine. um, but no, it was like entirely, I would trace it, which tracing's not hard, but you also have to make the background separate and stuff, like recreate it. So yeah, a lot of work.
So you rotoscope that. What would you say was your first kind of, were one of these ones that we mentioned before your first break, or did your first kind of breakout thing that you really hung your hat on come later?
I don't know because I don't really hang a lot on those.
Don't really hang a lot of
Yeah.
hats. I more
What do
wear
you
them.
consider hanging your hat? I guess I always consider that my next biggest project is just something that I'm working on or haven't done yet. Um
Ooh, it's such a great way of saying that. That like it
I'm
leaves it
always
up to
looking
the universe. That's
I'm always looking for the next best thing. There's a lot of stuff. I worked for Alec Monopoly for a while. That was interesting because he is a um country hopping like international artist. You can Google this guy. He's extremely wealthy. I got to work in his house. I got to like put
spell it.
resin on things and paint things. Alec, so it would be ALEC and then Monopoly, like the Monopoly man. If I
Oh,
don't know if
Alec
you're in
Monopoly.
LA.
Okay, Alec,
Um
known as Alec Andon, professionally known as Alec Monopoly, street artist, DJ, and originally from New York.
mhm.
Well, and looks every bit his title. Holy shit.
Yeah, imagine working for this guy inside his house. Like he had a studio in his house and he was like painting stuff for like the cartel and like
Nice.
Eminem. And so like I got to see kind of like what that other life was like. And weird enough on my resume, like a lot of people would recognize it because he has paintings all over like Melrose and Beverly Hills. Like this guy's pretty prolific. So people would be like, "Oh, you worked for him? What was that like?" I was like, "Very weird, as weird as you would think." The dude has met Banksy before.
That's
Like he
awesome.
told me that story. It's like, I'm pretty sure it was the sad guy in the corner that was him. I was like, "Jeez, okay."
So you get to work for them. When did you first start? So for those that don't know, you have on your Twitter, you create your own comic. Uh, when did that start happening? When did that become a part of your life?
Um, I mean, I've been doing comics almost since like high school. Like I have a long history of doing serials. Around 2017, I started working for this company called Sage Goddess, which is also, I feel like my entire resume is just weird things. Um, Sage Goddess was like a company that made things for witches. Like they made like candles and tarot decks and like new age type stuff. So they were like selling to women who were like over 30. That was like our target demographic. No lie, no lie. This actually is in like documentation for them. So I was working for them and they wanted some comics, strange enough. Like they were open to the creativity. So I started making comics about people within the office and things that they would do. And you can find those on my Becca Buns account. Um, so I started doing those, and I was like, I kind of want to make something that's with my own characters. So I branched off and I made a whole new Instagram just for basically animal based comics that I started during the pandemic. And they were originally about me and my partner and our happenings together during the pandemic and how like we really relied on each other and like how I was starting to get into like the furry community and like what that's like there's any community that you join, there's like drinking the Kool-Aid portions of it where you're like, how does this work? Or like, how do these people feel about this? And you learn how that community works. And so that's kind of what the comic was about in the very beginning.
how did you get into the furry community via art, or did you get into the furry community and then do art from the furry community perspective?
I mean, I've always been into art first. I would say that like you cannot really avoid the you can't really avoid the furry community if you're an artist, weirdly enough. Especially if you're in animation, it's almost impossible. They're like married to each other.
Damn you, Disney!
Kinda.
Like
Kinda.
that's a question that always makes me giggle. Is as somebody who grew up watching these bipedal Disney like furry characters, and people are like, "Where do these furries come from?" It's like, I don't know. Did you watch any animated movie during the '90s? Like, it makes a lot. Like, it makes a lot of sense. It's not some like grand mystery. Like watching The Lion King, there's moments where clearly one of the animators was closeted or just an outright furry, and nobody knew what the term was yet. It's like,
I think a lot of them were. I mean, like even Osamu Tezuka was a furry to some extent. There's like very strange drawings of mice you can find. If anybody is uninclined, Osamu Tezuka is considered the god of manga. Just as an aside. Um, but yeah, I got very interested in it because when I drew human comics, I would always get upset because I would have to represent people that actually existed, included myself, and it's like, am I making myself too attractive? Am I not including enough diversity? That becomes not a problem when you're using animals, and people do relate to them. So I found it a little bit easier to do in a
hmm,
weird way.
yeah.
Um,
No, it's that disconnect where it becomes you no longer have to play by the rules. You no longer have to meet any like certain criteria. You get it's like moving away to find, in a way it's like kind of like moving away to find yourself, like when you're a kid. If you like go to a different town, you can be whoever you want, by maybe by drawing in a different format, you are no longer constrained. Does that sound about right?
oh yeah, definitely. I
So
think overall that's like what people get from that community, as you find a lot of non-binary and trans people are within it. And it makes obvious sense if you can just represent yourself as literally anything, you know?
yeah, you're no longer held down by your previous identity. Your human, even your human visage is now corporeal, right? You're able to just be like, well, I'm this now, and nobody's like, but you were born blah 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 blah. They're just like, yeah, you're a fox, like fucking yeah, whatever. Like there's no judgment, just inclusivity, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, no, there isn't.
In so okay, my brain turned to mush. Did you join the community and then draw, or draw and then join the community? I spaced. My brain went.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah. I thought I answered that. I've
You
always done
probably
art,
did. I
as I
literally
said.
like.
So I would be drawing, and like I had friends that were furries, and they'd be like, "You draw this for me," and it would be like them, and I'm like, whatever. But I wouldn't consider myself part of it until I made my own character, and I made my own character, and I was like, oh, this is like a representation of me. This is like really cool. And that's where I consider myself to be like a furry, but like intermittently I was drawing that for people because like I said, like you can't separate the two really.
Yeah.
It's like if you're doing cartoon art or animation art, it's like eventually you'll run into furries, and I mean secrets out, most people in animation are furries. Or scalies.
Or what?
Scalies, like people that are dragons or
Oh, okay.
lizards and stuff.
They don't have fur, so technically they're scalies.
Yeah, yeah. The distinction's important, you know?
And actually, they have a tail, so all I can hear is the comic book, like somewhere between the comic book guy from from The Simpsons, and I don't remember what character it
Oh
is.
yeah. Or actually.
Yeah. So getting into that community, becoming a part of it, and being able to draw for it, what did that do to your art form? Did that change in any way, or was that just another kind of sandbox for you to play in, place for you to maybe pick up work, or way to, express yourself differently?
I think it definitely queued up the whole like drawing commissions for money thing, because before that I was doing like projects for companies that needed like commercials and stuff like that. And so, a lot of daunting work, whereas for the furry community, it's like people would pay me to draw like icons and things like that, which are a little bit less stressful to do. So it kind of expanded it, and I got a lot better at art. And the support I got for comics in the furry community, as opposed to just like in general, you know, on Reddit or Instagram, wherever you post things, it's like the furry community was a lot more supportive of like anything that I like posted. I was like really, really surprised by it initially. I was just like, this is just a thing, nothing, that's not a big deal or anything. But they're like, I
Yeah.
love this. And so you can't really turn down that kind of like positivity in a lot of ways.
Especially when it also pays money.
That too, it's like, I definitely sell a lot of books to like the community. I'm very much supported by it in a lot of ways.
So, as someone who does furry art, there are a lot of preconceptions about the community and the art style. If you could give a little PSA to the listeners out there of what is different than they might expect, what is like they expect, kind of for because I feel like there's so many people from the outside that look in and go, "Oh, you guys like wearing those costumes and like fucking," or "You
Oh
do that," and like
my
there's
god.
so many like every time. And to be frank, I have never gotten to have a conversation with somebody who's like fully involved in the community. So for myself and others, I'm very curious if you could kind of not that it's so easily to be a little punny. It's not, you can't paint it with one brush. But how would you describe, I guess, your experience with the community as far as what is to expect, and what do you think a fair shake would look like as far as expressing what it is to you?
I think it is very much about the art in a lot of ways. It's definitely about like expression. It's fascinating what some people will be. They'll be like, "Oh, my Sona is like a dragon like airplane, and like this is how it works, and it's the lore behind it." Like for people that love building stories, it's in a really amazing community. It definitely crosses over with, like D&D and also like Comic-Con related communities. But I would say like my viewpoint is from a cisgender woman, so it's like slightly different. But in terms of like people using their $10,000 fursuit in a sexual way, it's like I've only seen that in person once ever. Um, and I would say the community is very open sexually, and for some people, like it's their weekend getaway to like hook up with their friends. But that's very much in the context of like it being an LGBT community. It's like how people feel about going to like a gay man feels about going to like a gay bar type of situation.
Okay.
And you do have to be looking for that type of thing. But
So it is
it's
it is by no means just a sexual outlet as much as it is an expression outlet of your, this version of yourself that you either see yourself as, or maybe like to, kind I don't want to diminish it and say cosplay as, but for a lot of community members, is this kind of like, you know, an alternate identity? Do they believe this is their true identity? How would you kind of typify that for the uninitiated?
I mean, I would say that it's probably almost 90% that people are role playing.
Okay.
And they're like very well aware that this isn't really them, but it's who they want to be. And obviously, if you're playing this super confident character, attraction and like sexuality is gonna like come into play, like no matter like where you are. Um, but I would say that so there's like Therians, and I know a few people who are Therian, and some people uh
What are Therians?
Therian Therian is when you feel as though you should have been an animal.
Okay.
Um, and it's wildly debated within the community as being healthy or not. Everybody that I know is very much oh, I know I'm like a person and stuff like that. It's just sometimes I feel as though I should have been born an animal, or I feel like ghost limbs and things like that. It's very interesting. um but yeah, it is widely debated like within the community. Like people get upset when they hear things like that because they're like, you're not an animal, you're a person. um but it does represent a small portion of the community, and every Therian that I've met has been a pretty awesome, sane individual. um they're just like, hey, I'm actually like a fox.
Hmm.
And they process that through art or through other things. That's kind of their outlet for experiencing what they think is like their true life path.
Yeah. Would you say it diminishes or in any way kind of wildly changes the interactions you have with them compared to other furries or other persons in day to day, or is it more just I feel like this, that that's kind of how I feel. Hi,
it
hi, my name is blank, and let's continue having this cup of coffee, or is it here's my collar, walk me around the block, you know?
Oh no. Okay, so that would be considered pup play, or that's considered a kink. So it's like a big no-no. It's considered a large no-no because it is very much in a sexual kink space that people do that. So if you go to a convention, people aren't going to hand you like a leash and be like, lead me around. It's considered fetish. It's considered unsafe for minors. They don't usually allow it on the con floor at a convention.
So,
That's a big misconception. It's like, because okay, so for somebody to treat you like an animal, you're putting the impetus on them,
mhm.
um, in a lot of ways, and that's not something a furry would normally do unless you're in an environment like if you go to a party and it's a kink party, somebody will be like, "Do you want to lead me around on a leash?"
For
Right?
sure.
um but that's like within the realm of kink, so it just would never happen. Like somebody saying like, oh, I'm Therian, I'm a fox or like a dog, it's like they would probably be respectful enough to not put the impetus on you to treat them differently, I guess.
Do they expect? And I apologize, and do not mean to be stepping on any toes or saying a faux pas, but do they expect to be treated like an animal, or are they still of the opinion to be, or are they still like expecting to be treated like a human wearing a suit?
So every furry's different. So before somebody goes to a convention and before they like put on their suit, they'll make like a public post, especially if they're a well-known furry, and it'll say a few different things. It'll be like, hugs are okay, head pats are okay. I'm a silent suitor, meaning they won't say anything.
Hmm.
Like people usually set up boundaries before they ever get to a convention, or they'll wear like small signs that say how they want to be treated. But for the most part, if somebody's like your friend, it's like you're gonna deal with them the way you would a normal friend. You might like pat them on the head, maybe like, like you might do more because they're essentially a giant stuffed animal at the moment. Um, like snuggling with somebody in suit is just a really comfortable experience because they are a giant plush animal. But it is very much in the realm of like, if they want something, they'll say, but it's just never really expected. Like consent's kind of a big deal because, there's a lot of minors in the community, there's a lot of different age groups mixing together, so it's kind of really important to be like, this isn't okay, this is okay.
So you touched on that a second ago when I brought up the idea of a leash. How how kind of minor friendly is the community? Is it very intentionally like, look, we want, kids to be welcome, accepted, their parents not to be like put off, like what isn't accepted on, like you were saying, like the kind of general floor of the conventions?
So the leash part is like actually a really good thing for you to bring up because it's just wildly kind of disputed whether or not that's too kink for somebody to even wear. It's like leading somebody on a leash is actually illegal in multiple states. Like I did a convention in Tulsa, I didn't even know that, but it is illegal in Tulsa to have somebody on a leash. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I didn't know that until I went to a con there, and they're like, "Yeah, you absolutely cannot." Because I was with my friend and his partner, and he was leading him on a leash, and he's like, "Oh, we're doing something actually illegal right now." despite us being consenting adults who knew. So there's that. So conventions are usually like on the con floor. You can't really be wearing fetish gear. They'll have like an after hours party where you can do that officially at the con. And then of course, like most of the things that happen that are kink related happen in people's like hotel rooms for the most part.
So there's a lot of preconceptions in public media and in conversations that I've overheard where people are of the assumption that if you're a furry, that's a sexual thing for you. That you wear that to have sex, you derive sexual pleasure from that. In your experience in conversations you've had in the space, is that overwhelmingly the case, or do you find it more that it's just like we were talking about before, a form of self-expression, a form of identity, role playing, for some an escape?
Um, I think that's definitely mixed. Because some people are like plushophiles, like they're into like plushes or like things that are soft. There's people that are into like paw pads as like, on like fursuit. Like there's a lot of parts of that where that person will have a specific fetish that is like, redeemed by that aspect. So for me to be like, oh no, it's mostly expression is like would be false. Like there's definitely people that are, there's parts of the community that are part of their kinks. It just is.
So if
But I would say it's not I would say it's not an overwhelming part that you can't ignore. It's something that's gonna come up, but it's doesn't really paint the experience while you're there as much.
So if I were, say, a mother of a 13-year-old who was, curious, there was a furry convention in our town, kid wanted to go, and we were, prudish, or I didn't want to expose my child at such a young age to anything sexual just yet, would that be something that would be a fool's errand to let them go to, or would that be a safe enough space as much as anywhere else?
I mean, it depends on how old the kid is and how much they're getting into trouble. Like, if a kid's like 16, 17, and they're trying to party and do kink things with adults, it's like, a lot of party floors will have ID, but if somebody has a hotel room, they won't ID check. I think it's more so like, no, on the con floor, kids aren't really going to get into anything unless they're talking to adults. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's not going to be as on display unless you're letting your kid go through the not safe for work section of the convention. Like there's a lot of this where it's like if you're just with your kid, most likely nothing's gonna happen. They're not gonna be exposed to something terrible.
Would you say it's
It's more if they're
fairly
by
welcoming
themselves.
to people that are trepidatiously curious, or kind of, oh, I just want to do this as a fun, like, is there a sticking, a kind of wade pool, if you will, for those who are curious, don't want to bite off more than they can chew, and are just trying to like see what's out there in a like low key, safer work setting? Is that available and welcomed, or is that, look, these are the waters, there are deep sections, be wary where you put your feet?
I mean, not really. There's like a lot of people in the community who are just interested in cartoony art and like, you know, there's a lot for like a kid to kind of enjoy without ever really getting into that portion of it. There's also a lot of people that are like ace or like uninterested in the sexual aspect. So I would say if you like brought them to a con, it's like the only thing you'd be worried about is how interested the kid is in that type of thing.
Yeah.
Because if they are, it's like they'll find it. But I feel like that's more for kids that are like 16 to like 18, where they're like, I want to go to the not safe work section or I want to go to these parties and things like that. Um, but for the most part, it's like you're not gonna really find it on the con floor. Like a lot of the times for parties and things like that, it's like you have to know somebody, you have to talk to somebody. They'll have like posters up at a hotel for like different parties, but most of them are not sex related. It's like very hard for like a kid to go through and be like, oh, there's obviously something else funny going on here,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is kind of what I'm saying. It's like there's no real undercurrent of like, hey, this is about to get crazy.
Yeah.
Unless you're in portions that you shouldn't be in as a child.
So,
Yeah.
talking about, your whole entire life experience as an artist leading up to this, getting involved in the community, and then as you can see on your Twitter, this is something that you have, I don't want to say gone to like it's the dark side, but you but you create not safe for work content, or you have created not safe for work content. Either was it for self-expression or was it commissioned?
Sorry, what was it was commissioned or what?
Did you do this just out of like, I want to create something in this space and that's what you created, or were these commission works that are on your NSFW Twitter page?
Oh, most of those are commission work. I'm not what is it? I'm not a visual person in that way. Like it doesn't really do a lot for me. Like I like not safe for work art from like an artistic way, if that makes sense. Like if somebody draws anatomy well, or um they have good posing, like that type of thing. It doesn't do much for me personally. Which probably makes me a pretty good artist in that space because I'm not very judgmental. It's I'm not really getting embarrassed or hot and bothered of what they're like asking me to draw. I'm just like,
Yeah.
okay, I just need to get these things in their proper places.
Well, I'm assuming that kind of answers my follow-up question. Was when you first got a commission request for an NSFW piece, was it furry related or was it prior to this?
I think actually it was anime. Like I think somebody had me draw a Dakimura, which is like the giant pillows.
Okay. So when you got that request, when you got the first request, was that something as an artist that you were kind of off put by, like, how dare you sully my work or think less of me to produce this? Or were you just kind of like, oh, you're going to pay me to do what I love in creating art?
Well, it was like from a friend, so it was very much like, oh, cool, you're paying me to like support my art. um, but no, for a lot of those, it's kind of I just don't feel like it really sullies it per se. Um, I don't know. People do always ask me about like the not safe for work stuff, but considering like how often I draw other things, like it almost feels weird to be answering questions about it because there's just so many other artists that's their like bread and butter.
Yeah.
And there's parts of me where it's like there's something attractive to that as well. It's like you're saying about like the dark side. It's like to be somebody who's known for like your not safe for work art is like kind of cool in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, like you're setting a standard for like fetishism in some ways. Like, oh, that's cool. Oh my gosh.
When you got that, was there at any point in your career, as this is something you've done for your livelihood, you have credits, were you ever worried about it interfering with your more common work or your more day-to-day work?
Not really. It would be really hard for like a 9 to 5 type job to find the furry stuff, really. But even if they did, it's like most artists that are in my field, most people that are making art, do this kind of thing. Like they have some skeletons in their closet in some
That's
ways.
so interesting. Because one of the things the listeners know, but you may not, is I went to film school, and one of the things that was talked about a lot at film school was do not get involved with the like porn industry. It'll kill your career. Like,
Oh, I mean, for animation, it's like I know a lot of animators working on, daytime TV shows that will draw porn, like secretly under aliases, but it exists.
yeah, is that pretty common? Like, are the aliases kind of known within the industry and just nobody talks about, because everybody's got a skeleton closet, so nobody brings it up? Or is it,
We just talk about it. I think the difference is kind of this. It's like the porn industry, it's like no matter how clean it ever gets because it involves like actual people. There's always going to be issues and like, oh, is this person getting paid enough? Are they getting exploited? Like, no matter what. And I mean, it is a lot better with OnlyFans right now since everybody's their own boss.
Yeah.
There's still like an attachment we have to like humanity and human bodies and like that type of thing that just doesn't exist when you're drawing stuff that's two-dimensional. You know, like there's certain issues people have, like my friends and I will never draw a character that's very obviously like a child, things like that, because the community does care about that a lot. They also care a lot about things being on four legs. There's like a lot of discourse over feral furry art, which is very funny because I assume that regular people are like, well, if it's dog's head sucking a dick, it's a dog head sucking a dick. It doesn't matter if it's on four legs or not. It's weird. So like those are some of the discourse that comes from like drawing art, but like for the most part, it's not something you want on your main page, but it's not something that's needs to be so buried because historically there's just always been pornography in that industry. Like Disney has a vault full of pornography made by different Disney artists. It's true.
Oh, I believe it. That there's so many vault, stories I've heard about Disney that does not surprise at all. It just like that's kind of awesome.
I think you could maybe find some samples of it online, but yeah, they have to put it in the vault because anything you make for Disney belongs to Disney.
Wait, hold on. Does that mean that Disney has commissioned furry art?
I mean, on a technicality, I've known a few people that have worked for Disney, and during the time you're working for them, if you work on like a side project or even like a sketch, like there's a chance that it, according to your contract, it belongs to them. So that's kind of where that comes from. It's like, well, if I'm drawing pornography, then I guess that
so when shit hits the fan, we'll know when. We'll know when Disney's about to go under because it'll start selling furry porn.
They just might.
That's when you know to sell your stocks or buy more of them, depending upon which way you look at it. So speaking of Disney, when you were fully starting to realize your vision and your passion, what was your dream involvement with this? Like, did you see yourself becoming, working for Disney, doing the next Pixar movie? Did you see yourself becoming, only taking commissions and doing, kind of having your own website and doing your thing your way? What was the, the kind of Everest that you wanted to head towards?
It's kind of like difficult for me to talk about because I never really, it's like I had to choose a studio like at the end of college, and I never really had a dream place that I wanted to work in terms of like animation. And at this point in my life, I know a lot of people that work at studios. I know a lot of people that are like in industry like that, and like I don't know if that would have made me happy to do that. Like I never wanted to work for Disney. It's just not my style. In a lot of ways. I kind of just wanted to learn the skills and then like apply them to like my own work, and like develop a better like work ethic and then also print more books. So like in a lot of ways, like I've accomplished what I wanted to do. It's just that there's always more, and like building on my own popularity is kind of where I want to go. Like I want to get to a point where I'm subsisting off of like my Patreon or like book sales or things like that. I feel like that's where the industry's going.
Speaking of, where can they buy your books?
You can buy them on Amazon if you search up my name. Either or, it could be under Trash Camel or under Rebecca Sveinsson. But Volume 2 just came out. I think it should populate on Amazon soon. I go through a publisher called Ingram Spark, so they do the distribution for Amazon, and I just ordered like a whole set of books from them, so it should be up on Amazon rather soon. I could probably drop a link for you as well.
This is really weird. I'm looking up Trash Camel, and the first thing that came up was a bunch of wastebaskets. And then Garbage Pail Kids.
That's amazing.
So I think I'm gonna.
That's amazing. Oh, looks like it's also on thrift books now too. It's been on Amazon long enough to now be thrifted. But there's one link. Oh, also you can find my books at Partners and Son in Philadelphia. I'm trying to get into more stores. Barnes and Noble. It's mostly available online. But what's neat about like book publishing is that if you have stuff on Barnes and Noble or Amazon, you can start bringing your books to Barnes and Nobles and you ask for signings, and they'll start carrying your books in the store.
Oh.
If you are distributing through the distributor that I use. But yeah, that's just one of the books. I could probably send you more comprehensive links after.
Oh, thank you. I will be sure to include them. So, with creating books like this, how has it been compared to how you either feared or hoped? You know, a lot of people think about creating books and they either think that they're going to, tap the chats and, immediately become famous or, do really great. Some people, expect or, worry that it's going to, they're going to print 100 and only sell 2 to their, just grandparents who are like, just buy it out of, trying to show love. What has been your experience?
I think people like books. I mean, I like books. So there's like if you're tabling and you have your books there, you're selling yourself in a lot of ways. I was lucky that when I started printing my comics, I already had somewhat of a fan base. So, I've sold like a lot of books at just conventions to people and some people hadn't even read it before. They're just like, oh, this looks cool, I want to check it out. I think people are very interested in situations where the author is selling their own work. So that's always where I've had like the most success. A big thing for books, at least in like the children's book space, is that you want to get them into like libraries and you want to get them into schools, which is something I'm working on right now for the first children's book that I did. Because that was very much a family members bought it and things like that. And when I shopped it to a library, like there's specific rules for different libraries. They'll be like, we don't like the way that this is capitalized, or like we don't like how you set this up, like you need to change it. Like they're picky, which I didn't know. They're very picky. It's like even schools also will have parameters that you need to hit. The first children's book that I did had like a section in the back with games. Like it had like a maze and it had stuff for kids to do. And they're like, it absolutely can't have that in the back. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. I was trying to have fun.
Obviously, you can't have these in a children's book.
Yeah, but I guess, my thought was like somebody bought it for the kid. Their kid would be able to mark it and make it their own. But like, it does make sense if it's at a library or at a school. You don't want kids writing in the book or getting used to writing in the book. So those things, I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So one of the kind of reoccurring segments we have on this podcast is we ask people, especially about passions that are their occupation, to compare what they do to the way they are represented in film and television. Often they get it either wildly wrong or occasionally they get it absolutely spot on. In your estimation, working as an artist who has, worked in the film industry, worked independently, how do you feel you have been represented by Hollywood?
It's a pretty good question. I guess in a lot of ways they really try to make it look like, if we were going to use like Chasing Amy as like a representation, because the two characters in that are comic book authors. I mean that was made in the 90s, so of course they weren't using computers, but I think a lot of times when they depict artists, it's always like, oh, they're like painting and they're crazy and they're doing this big installation. And it's like, some people do that, and it's very visually interesting. But for the most part, a lot of them are just working on like their iPad or their like tablet at like a desk, and that's what their work is. It's like a lot of stuff is just not done on paper anymore. So that would probably be the biggest one, and then also like just how like completely dorky like a lot of animators are.
So they got that part right.
I think so. I think so. Um, it's also like the starving artist thing is not true for like a lot of people that work in like the as an animator. Like I know like a lot of people in LA with houses that like that's their only gig was ever working in like animation. So it's like definitely it's definitely more lucrative than people claim for it to be. For people that are working on like mainline shows and like for Warner Brothers and stuff.
How, as someone who has been involved in the industry but also makes their own product, how difficult is it to get in the industry? Is it like kind of winning the lottery, akin to, it when we talk about working in the industry for acting, there are so few people that do it. Like there are
Mm.
working actors, but there's a lot of actors who, they're constantly on auditions. They're trying to, but not frequently succeeding as much as they had hoped. Do you think that it is harder to be an artist or to be an actor?
Whew. Um, Man, it's probably harder to be an actor, honestly, because
So,
there's always somebody that needs something. I mean, even with like AI, it's like there's always somebody that needs something for like their business or at least graphic design to some extent. There's a lot of situations where people just don't know how to use things like Canva or Photoshop.
raise his hand in solidarity.
And then also like for animations, like you need people to work on it. And I mean, you could go overseas if you wanted to, but it's a little bit easier to have somebody that speaks your language that's understanding what you mean when it comes to like how something should be made or drawn or how a script should work. Uh,
So,
so I would say that like in a lot of ways it is hard to break into the industry right now because it's in like a pretty big recession.
mm,
Um, but it's not really like impossible. It's
yeah,
just that things are sort of in flux with like the addition of AI and then also like just contracts being negotiated like within the industry. It's like I know a lot of people that are currently out of work that have just never been out of work. Like they've been in the industry for years, just working full time on like a show. So it's like hard to say at the moment, but I'd say
sure.
like it's not a hard industry to break into, especially if you make good friends and if you know people. It's very
S-
nepotism based.
Sad, but from what I've heard, quite
Sad
true.
but true.
Yeah. So it would be if, so for instance, let's say, you had a family member, like a young niece or nephew, who was like, I'm gonna grow up and be an animator for, like who for whatever. That's gonna be my job. That wouldn't be as absurd. Or, you wouldn't be like, all right, like that's your dream, but what's your reality? Like when kids talk about growing up to be a famous movie star, a lot of responsible parents say, all right, let's go for it, but also get your degree, but also, what's your backup plan? What are you going to do in the meantime? But if I'm understanding you correctly, you wouldn't say that necessarily to an artist. It would be like, all right, go for it. You can get there. That is attainable. You don't need to win the lottery to do it. You need to be good.
I would say you need to be good, and you also do desperately need to enjoy it. It's definitely not something to do for money. I mean,
Sure,
like I
sure,
think
sure.
that's pretty obvious, actually. Um, but also there's like a certain. It just seems like the current trend right now is like try really hard, like on your own, to like pump up your social media and just do your own thing. You know, it is highly competitive, but I just don't think it's the same as like being an actor.
Yeah.
um it might mean that you have like more than one job or something, but you could definitely still do it and like make a name for yourself.
So, what would you say is the biggest misconception about your passion by the wider world?
Which of my passions?
But
Sorry.
touche. About, artistic expression, especially in the format of comic book creation.
Misconceptions. I think a lot of people find it to be a pretty vapid. Still, I think a lot of like people don't know how complex a lot of comics can get. I mean, that's definitely changing, and I feel like kids do not feel that way. Like, there's a lot of really good books for kids out right now that are comics. But I think still in the Western world, they're seen as sort of like lowbrow to some
Yeah.
extent. Like, I had somebody see my book collection. I have mostly comics here, but I've also read a lot of the classics. Like, I've read a lot of, difficult books. I don't know, War and Peace and like Brave New World and like just things they make you read in like high school. And this person was very impressed with that. And I was like, I don't feel as though that's as impressive, but also what about comics being like art or being like high literary achievements? Because I think a lot of them are. So that's something that I think that a lot of people just don't feel for the industry.
So for art, we talked about, earlier in animation, there are people that were, all they did was work on big projects, and now they're kind of, back out in the weeds looking for work. Do you find and see, in other than in this, new kind of awkward recession that we're having in this field, do you believe it is necessary to have to hustle to, kind of create your own workspace like you have with creating your own comic books and teaching and doing this and doing that? Do you think that is necessary for most artists in this time, or can they find a, it's not going to be a 9 to 5 because it's an artistic expression field, but can they find something adjacent thereof that they can, kind of clock in, clock out?
I think it sort of depends. Like, at least for like the way the industry is right now, it's like I would say like a couple of years ago, it'd be like, you can get a job like within the industry if you just have like a stellar portfolio on like social media. Like, I know some people that got hired onto like Invincible that way. They just had like a really stellar portfolio with like a lot of movement. It's like very obvious that they could draw what they needed to. But I mean, I think the safest bet is if you have like a solid plan for sort of developing your own, sort of, I don't want to say brand, but that's the word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you trying to like bring to the table and how to effectively do that and set it up so that you're making income that way. Just because, I mean, for me, it's like I've been working in this industry a long time, and at this point, it's like I'm not sure like what the future holds for it at the moment, but I'm seeing artists on their Patreon. It's like I have a Patreon myself. It's like I get a lot of support just from my community for what I do, and that does translate into like income. Um, so it's really just going down the avenues and trying different things to kind of make it as an artist. But it's like hard for me to be like, this is solid advice, because who knows? It's like tomorrow, the Animation Guild or someone else could strike like a good deal with like studios that would secure a lot of other people work, and then it would be more of a apply and like do internships and make a great portfolio, and then you'll be able to be in the industry. It's just very up in the air in terms of like what the job market in that case is going to look like.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. It's heartbreaking, but very honest, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think a lot of it is just that it's going to move to more individuals making their own content, which is ultimately what a lot of people want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I want to do.
I guess you get to have your own like digital gallery, basically, right?
Well, it's not only that, it's like it's easier now more than ever to have like your own shop, and like I mean, I'm working on making pillows and making like t-shirts and like totes and things like that. It's like it's now more easier than ever to do what a studio can do. You could do like a GoFundMe and like make an animated short. Like there's a lot at our fingertips right now as like individuals. And for me, it's like I just feel like the industry is going to move that way. I see a lot of people just doing their own thing.
Right on.
Yeah.
So, on said happy note, what would you say is your favorite non-obvious aspect to either animation, comic book creation, or just whatever part of artistry you find fits best here?
What's the like something about it that people might not realize, or
Yeah, like something like kind of the flip reverse of the biggest misconception is this is the thing that people don't realize, that they're kind of the kind of hidden gem that the populace by and large are missing out on.
um it's just really cool for people to tell you that they like your work. Or sometimes what's very interesting is so I had a character come up in my comic like randomly, and their name was like Sergio, and they get like callbacks. They're only mentioned twice. There's like over 500 comics, they're only mentioned twice, and they showed up in a recent one, and they're like, and some people were like, oh my god, is that so and so? And I was like, how do you even remember that? So it is really touching when people pay attention to your work or like are looking for things within it. It's like, that's really cool that you care.
Yeah.
So there's like some parts of just like putting your work out there that's like pretty rewarding, and just that like some people will just care a lot about it, remember things, or like bring up things that maybe even like you forgot. Like,
Yeah.
who's drawing this? Is it me? Who's making this?
Well, to move on from something that's so lovely to something that perhaps might be a little lackluster.
Ruh-roh.
Bex, what is your preposterous peeve?
Oh, I think we talked about this earlier, but yeah, I don't like when people say, how are you? And don't actually mean to ask you how you are. Just say hello. Just say hello.
You're not a big fan of the what's his name from Friends? The Joey intro. You don't like somebody walking up and going, "How you doing?"
Yeah, because he never wants to know how they're doing. He never wants to know. He's just like trying to make them uncomfortable.
So is it the fact that the question is disingenuous, or you feel like you're trapped with not answering it genuinely?
I think I just hate English. I think I just hate how like the English language, we say things so much that it loses meaning, or like we attach such different, because okay, so say you learn how are you doing in like Japanese or something else, it's like that's an interjection into a longer conversation. It always is.
Yeah. It's a question, not a greeting.
Yes.
Yeah.
A little more so. But it also like it underplays like our need to keep things light also.
Yeah.
It's like I think it denotes like intimacy to like actually talk about like how you're really doing. And it's like if you're talking to a coworker or somebody that you're not as close with, you're just like, oh, I'm fine. Inside like you're falling apart.
Yeah.
But that's not, we have to have like a certain surface level of like professionalism and being fine like in between life. And I think that also is kind of like a little iffy to me. Like I feel like we should be more honest.
Well, the best part is
people should accept honesty.
Absolutely agree. The best part is I don't quote me on this, but I think that this is a strictly American thing too, because I don't believe this is an interaction that is typically done in the British Isles, or even, I mean, maybe it's a Canadian thing as well, but I don't believe it's done in Britain or Ireland or anything like that either, mostly because they're a very kind of, closed off culture comparatively. But I believe this is more of like a North American kind of thing.
That's kind of how I feel about it as well. It's like I've traveled quite a bit, and I've tried to pick up like quite a few languages just in travel, and like it's never really taken the same way. The like, how are you type of deal. So I guess that also like plays into the American need to just like rush through things also, right? Like we're just gonna get from A to B.
When or has there been a time where this has really caused either a stir, publicly, because you actually did kind of lean into either answering or asking somebody truly how they were, or perhaps, at a party over conversations, you're just like, you know what? Nah, we're not doing this. Not anymore.
I think it happened at a party. I knew a friend was going through something, so I asked how they were doing, and somebody interjected to also ask like me, like as an exchange of greeting, and they just completely did not understand that, like, this person was very obviously a little distraught.
Yeah.
We were very obviously about to have a serious conversation. And so I got kind of upset. I was like, I'm not doing good. Which made them like want to leave, but I was like, I feel like in some ways if you're entering a conversation, it's like you should be a little sensitive to kind of like what is going on in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I think that's one time that I got very upset about it, is just because the person they weren't really intuiting like what was going on.
It is really funny though how answering that question genuinely doesn't work, which adds to my understanding of your frustration. Oh, somebody goes, "How are you doing?" You're like, "Terrible." They're like, "Oh." And there's no like response in our current, kind of cultural English subset of like, "Oh, that sucks." Anyway, so and like you can't if like
it's like, are we stopping to talk about it? It's also if you ask somebody how they're doing and then they break out into like their whole day, it's like, did you ask for that? I guess technically you kind of did.
Yeah.
But we don't accept that also as like as a response. It's a weird pet peeve to have, but I stand by it.
As you should. Well, lastly, before we throw it to a commercial break, if you could have listeners of this podcast hear one song of your choosing, which would it be?
I think I listed Pure Space by Unicorn Kid as being mine. Which, fun fact, they do not make music anymore. Yeah. I got into them in high school. I've been in the chiptune space, so I've met people that have known them, and yeah, they just stopped making music. They were like a software engineer, I believe. They just went back to doing that. But it's really fun and happy and cool chiptunes.
Well, with that sad note, we're going to throw it to our sponsors so Bex here can have a minute to put on this here rubber suit before we get all up in the lightning round. But if advertisements aren't your thing, why not have a listen to Pure Space by Unicorn Kid? Or if you really wanted to hear a song from a previous episode, check out the playlist on Spotify, Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast, Song Rex. It's a long title, I know. Don't worry, there's a link in the description. Either way, see you in a bit. This podcast is sponsored by Irrationally. One of the easiest things you can do with your hands and a light source in a dark room. Over human history, millions of people have used Irrationally to great enjoyment. With limitless possibility and no upfront costs, Irrationally will have your hands busy forever. Or until the power comes back on. So what are you waiting for? The power to go out? Oh yeah, right. Okay. Well, but when it does, we'll see you and your Irrationally on the wall. And we're back. Bex, are you ready to enter lightning round?
The lightning round.
I guess so.
All right, put however much time it takes to bake this cookie on the clock. Bex, would you rather meet an alien or a ghost?
Probably an alien. I feel like they'd have a lot more to add. I feel like I've met ghosts.
Album, shuffle, or playlist?
Oh boy. Playlist.
Which is realer, mermaids or Bigfoot?
Bigfoot. I feel like I know Bigfoot.
Did you ever cheat on a test in school?
No, actually.
Are hot dogs tacos?
Yes, but only because it annoys people.
Have you ever had a crush on a cartoon character?
Oh yeah, sadly.
Sadly.
I'm an animator, I have to.
I was gonna say, would you rather have tentacle arms or kangaroo legs?
Oh, kangaroo legs.
Skydiving or deep sea diving?
Oh, skydiving, because I have that fear of large things underwater.
Save 100 strangers or a loved one?
Oh, geez. I mean, 100 strangers just because I'm greater good focused.
Are you being the person Mr. Rogers knew you could be?
Probably, actually.
Do people who prefer Pepsi to Coke deserve human rights?
I care for neither, so maybe I don't deserve human rights.
Make the food or do the dishes?
Make the food.
Is professional wrestling cool or lame?
I think it could be cool as a fiction.
And lastly, could you eat 37 of your favorite food for $5,000 in a 1 hour time limit?
Yes.
Congratulations! Sushi. You've survived the lightning round! Now, before we move on, I, like many listeners, would like to now know, what is your favorite food that you could eat 37 of in a 1 hour time limit for $5,000?
Sushi, which is a very easy thing to eat like 57 of.
McGeets.
Right. I eat that whenever I go to the conveyor belt sushi already. Like, all right, give me the money then.
Well, now as a reward, my gallivant guest, I grant thee a lightning round question of your own to be echoed till the ends of time. What you got for us?
Would you rather dance naked in the snow, surrounded by a group of at least 20 people, or walk on hot coals in front of a group of 20 people? I guess that's based on your insecurities, right?
I mean,
are you insecure or scared of heat?
So my feet are fucked up. When I was 17, I grew up in northern Nevada, and on a summer program we did a hike through the 40-mile desert, which is just outside my hometown. And
interesting.
During which I stepped in a couple puddles, even though we were in the middle of the 40-mile desert. Hilarious, I know. And then I got very cold, and I didn't take my boots off because it was so cold, which gave me I can't remember the term for it right now, but it's like, it's not frostbite, it's frost touch or something like that. It
turned your foot black?
It turned it white.
Is that thing for Mr. Deeds?
Mr. Deeds is black. My feet were white on the bottom. When I took my socks off, when I finally got home the next morning, I was having trouble walking. I was in so much pain. And the bottom of my feet were as white as a piece of paper. And it took hours for them to return to their normal color. And since then, I've always kind of had problems with my feet. So as much as I don't like being naked in front of people or in the cold, I'm really worried that hot coals on bare feet might fuck me up forever. So people get ready to see this gorgeous body. What about you? What about you, Bex?
I might do the hot coals, because I never said you had to do them barefoot. But no, I think also just as I think it would just be really cool as a accomplishment.
A bucket list item, if you will.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, like any other bucket list item, we have come to the end of this one. Is there anything you want to plug, shout outs you'd like to give, or places people can find you or your content?
So there's like a few things. So I'll be at WonderCon this coming weekend, which is in Anaheim. So come visit me. I'll be tabling on Friday. And then also my link tree, just peep at that and you can read free comics, obviously. I'll be releasing a serial probably in the next 2 weeks on Webtoon. So yeah, I don't know if I should drop my links here or
you send them to me and I will put them in the episode doobly-doo.
Yeah, I have a link tree. They're all in the same place. Makes it easy.
Yay!
Yeah. But yeah, that's all for me in that regard. You'll find my books there
all
as well.
right, past me.
Sweet.
Well, thank
Yay.
you, Bex, for being my guest today, and a special thanks to my editor, Richard Ashford, and my composer, Joshua Gibbons. And thank you, you, listening at home or wherever you found time to appreciate this. Time is the most precious commodity we have, and I really do appreciate you spending yours with us. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, or just share with a friend. Every little bit helps. Or if you already have and are out of episodes to listen to, don't worry. We put out a new episode every Monday at midnight on Soundcloud, YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes at Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast. And a very special thanks are due to our patrons, Sibeli Yellow. If you'd like to join said illustrious ranks and have your name read aloud, just head over to patreon.com/Passionate People and Preposterous Peeves Podcast. And do remember, folks, if days are numbered and songs are sung, at the end of the day, I think we've all won. So please stick around, because great things have only just begun.